The Swell Season podcast is recorded by the Newsstand Studio at Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan and is distributed by the Swell Season Surf Radio Network.
So welcome to Swell Season Radio. I'm here with my co-host Chris Coffin, and we're very excited to have Scott Szegeski here tonight. Szegeski.
Szegeski.
I
got it.
Yeah. And we're super stoked to have this local guy on. We're going to talk about what he's been doing here in New Jersey for the past, I think, 25, 30 years, maybe. And his history within the surf industry and the artwork he's been making over the past couple of years. We're very excited to kind of learn more about it. So with no more, waiting, here's Scott and Chris and myself. So Scott, if you could kind of tell us basically where you grew up around here. Did you grow up in New Jersey in Monmouth County or further south? Where did it start?
Born in Ocean County, Point Pleasant, and then grew up there till about grade school, and then, like every good Hungarian, I moved up to New Brunswick, and but kept the family house down in Normandy Beach, Deauville Beach, right north of Bay Head, south of Lavalette, kind of in between there, Maniloking area. But like I said, all Hungarians have to go to New Brunswick at some time, hopefully before they die. And I had to fulfill my ancestral destiny.
Yep. So is that where that barrier island starts, or is that still main, like, continental New Jersey, where you drive straight to the beach, or is there a bridge to get there?
It starts in Point. So the Ocean County, Monmouth County line is Brielle, Point Pleasant. And once you cross the Point Pleasant Bridge, you're in Ocean County. You're no longer in Monmouth County. And it extends all the way down on that island to the end of Island Beach State Park. And then Ocean County continues on the other side in Barnegat, and then all the way down to Tuckerton, I think. It's
nice. Nice.
South Toms River, Tuckerton.
So when I first moved down to New Jersey, I was under the impression the place was a shithole. And that's coming from New York, where everyone from New Jersey thinks where I grew up in Long Island is kind of a shithole. And
because no one knows where to go. That's the problem.
And that's similarly across, New Jersey and New York. And I felt like when I first met you in a bar that you owned, and we had a conversation, you were running restaurants, you had a very sophisticated art practice, and that's where I picked up with you. But I heard whispers of you working for magazines such as Surfer and Snowboarder magazine, and I was wondering if you kind of elaborate on your journey from backwards, kind of from like being a restaurateur, a mushroom guy, and a surfer, and an artist, to like where you were before all that kicked off.
Sure, easy. Yeah, like I said, I grew up surfing in New Jersey, and schooling and everything like that, and was lucky enough, and I guess now old enough to be in the kind of beginnings of the snowboard world. the movement from
Mm-hmm.
skiing to snowboarding in its infancy, and it was a pretty natural progression for me to go into that. And out of high school, that's kind of all I wanted to do. So I wound up packing up and moving to Colorado, going to school out there, and kind of ski bumming for a couple of years. Got an English degree from the Western State College of Colorado, and would always kind of travel back east in the summer times, travel west on spring break to kind of hit some water and sun and things like that. I had delusions of grandeur of going out west and becoming a pro snowboarder, and learned pretty quickly that being from the East Coast, it was a very steep learning curve. Even just the riding and everything, the speed, the everything. They were already, even in its infancy, miles ahead of where we were out east. Minus Stratton, a couple places up in Maine, and a couple of outliers who just managed to kind of make that leap. It was tough for me. So I went to school, studied journalism, English, literature, and post-college graduation, after ski bumming for a couple of years and logging 180 plus days a year, applied to and got, I guess, hired as an intern in the for the Surf Report, which was run by a fella from South Carolina, author right now. Chris Dixon is his name. He just wrote that great Oceana book that just came out. Wrote a couple biographies for Jimmy Buffett. Anyway, pre-internet days, the way to gain surf knowledge on a certain area in the world was to subscribe to something called the Surf Journal, and it was like sometimes a 4-5 page printout of things in the area where you wanted to go, and you could sign up.
It was like Cliff Notes for surfers.
Totally.
I remember if I was going to travel, I would get one, and that was like the intel, and it was funny. I remember having a couple of those in my truck, and like we would drive around different surf spots, and you'd talk to guys, and you'd be like, "Hey, do you have one of those surf journals for Puerto Rico, for Costa Rica, for Nicaragua, or the West Coast?" And we would trade them, trade. It was cool.
Which is, I don't know. I hold those things sacred, and I think our digital age has kind of taken, not to be too philosophical about it, but it's taken all that kind of research out of it and it's put it in the hands of everyone. And
it's too easy. It's too easy. It's too accessible. You had to dig, you had to search, you had to talk, and you had to flip a coin and hope for the best and go. I remember that.
Totally. Yeah, it was cool.
A conversation like this 2 days ago in my dining room, talking about surf reports from local surf shops before the internet was around. You had to call up and wait for the answering machine for certain people like Rick's Surf Shop or somebody like that.
Tony G and Ocean Hut.
And they'd go through their hokey whole thing about like the sales they had on. At the end, they'd have a surf report, and you'd kind of get a glimmer of what might be happening, but it was already 3 hours into it. If the line was busy, you probably should have gone already. So it's kind of funny.
It's I don't know. That's one of the things that I guess what happens when you get older. So you start to reminisce, and you start to think about those things, and I kind of wish we started reverse engineering all the accessibility now, and started, I don't know, giving people a test, and if they pass the test, even if it's online, you're able to get that information. Maybe just it's just a quick, surf etiquette test, and if you pass it, you get all the information you want in Nicaragua. But at least you know that you have those basic needs fulfilled before you actually book that trip.
Right.
So so I wound up working out there. I didn't really have a plan when I got hired with Chris. What I did have was a 1984 Westfalia Volkswagen, and my plan was to live in it. So I went out to Surfer's Journal was inside Surfer Magazine, which was also house snowboarder, skateboarder, powder magazine. I forget the bike magazine. Was it bike? Something. It wasn't that easy. Yeah, man, I had a degree, and I was living in my van at Doheny Beach. Doheny is a great place. No more waves, but the camping facilities were great, and I spent a solid year in my car. And the beauty of living in your car and working was that minus surfing and skating after everything closes, you're there. I had the ability to be there all the time and didn't really have any plan other than surfing and skating. So
for our younger viewers, can we put this in a time context? Like what years are we talking?
96.
96?
Yeah, 96. 96. Maybe? I think so.
That lands me in middle school.
Yeah. I think it was 96.
Scott, I think you and I are roughly the same age.
Yeah, I just turned 48.
Yeah, I'm 50. I'm 52. So we're in the same ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a neat time to be there. It was kind of again, I was available, so I'd kind of wander the halls and see what people are doing and stick my nose in, and wound up meeting the then photo assistant. Jason Murray was his name. He worked under Jeff Devine up at Surfer, and Rob Campbell was another guy, both Jersey guys, which was I guess serendipitous, cause I wound up working in the warehouse, cleaning up the garbage, stocking the back stocks, and slowly just worked my way to the edit desk and started, just offering my services for free at night, and wound up being an associate editor at the end of it, of Snowboarder magazine, not Surfer.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. Yeah, so that took me to California. California was great. I missed the snow a little bit. I missed the East a little bit. So I kind of came back for a little hiatus, and then wound up everyone kind of, it was again 96, 97, the beginning of the .com boom, and I was home for about a year here. Wound up working at a restaurant, meeting my future wife. We didn't date.
Which restaurant was that?
What?
Which restaurant was that?
That was we met at a restaurant called Cafe La Playa in Maniloki. It's inside Used to Be's bar.
Oh,
so
okay.
But in between that, everyone that I worked with at Surfer, Snowboarder, Skateboarder, we all wound up leaving. We got a bunch of money from some venture capitalists up in San Francisco, and we started Surfline, the modern day version of Surfline. Swell.
Really?
Swell was the surf version of it. Cross Rocket was the snowboard version of it, and Big Skate was a skate version of the .com. Yeah, it was cool. First thing they did was buy Surfline, and I got to meet Sean Collins back in the day, and we just started this crazy process. And about like 9-10 months into it, everyone's like, all right, so now how are we going to make money? And everyone was like, I don't know. So but it was that lasted probably about 2 years. So I was back in California for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, .com started going a little crazy. And the question was, how are we going to make money? And I think Swell had a very good model, with Surfline. They had a pretty good user base through Sean's his app, which I'll call it, which isn't really an app, his subscribers. So you were able to monetize Swell. And in the end, I think that's the only reason why it's still around. They were able to kind of keep all the people that paid Sean Collins for a surf report. They still kept paying for a surf report, which is a really credit to what he did back in the 80s, which is crazy, but super cool.
I had no idea you were part of the beginning of Surfline and that whole thing. That's kind of rad.
Listen, not to make any bold claims, but we were in the build up phase of the snowboard part of Swell. Okay. And we actually, I was like, you know what? All this fantasy football shit, man. There's got to be a way that we could bet on snowboarders and how they do, and like let's use like the the US Open, and let's do this, like let's do this test of like where you kind of draft people and you make a team and you do this and you do that, and kind of the model of fantasy football, but moving it into the surf skate and snowboarding world. And
that would be pretty cool, man. I am admittedly a fantasy football junkie. You can get the WSL. Yup.
In a full circle kind of way. Fast forward 15 years later, and I have a bar in Asbury Park, and I get a call from the WSL that they want to they want to sponsor, they want to get a team they want to start localizing teams, and they want to take people and move them to areas and line them up with breweries to kind of get a team together betting on surfing events that go to one bar to watch the bar. And, they gave us, surfboards and things like that, and kind of was this semi big deal at some point, even though I was way past it, but I was like, you know what, motherfucker, this was kind
You're way ahead of your time, dude.
This is kind of our idea, the dream, just, I don't know. The timing was quite funny. Being at the beginning of things is a good and bad thing. The good thing is being able to kind of be there for its birth, which is great. And I'll go back to, snowboarding, where, you're able to, there were still mountains in Pennsylvania that didn't allow snowboarding, and, wound up going to the ones that did. And, the only one that had a half pipe in our area, was Jack Frost. And, I did a contest at Jack Frost and got second place. And I was, the first place guy was like, I'm going out west. I'm going to be a pro snowboarder. And I was like, I want to go out west and be a pro snowboarder too. And you have these connections with those things that are, I don't know. It was special to be around. It was definitely a lot more a young man's game, the ability to just pick up and move out west. And now it's not so easy, but that kind of got me started in the whole world. I always drew, and I always wrote poems. I've written a couple of movies that have gone nowhere. But
I like your children's book, which we have to still flesh out.
Come on, no surfing for daddy. it'd be a great book.
Oh man, dude, I gotta get this. Can we find it on Amazon? Is it out there?
Not yet. Me and Chris have to
working on
get together, and it's written. We just got to get it. Every parent has one time or another been stuck with their kids while the surf is firing.
Please, dude! It
And-
happened to me 2 weeks ago. What's it called? No surfing for daddy.
No surfing for daddy.
Dude, I'm getting one.
Easily we adapted for No Surfing for Mommy and resold as on Amazon. Yeah. Inspired by a really good Saturday of surf and 2 screaming kids and me getting texts from all my single and non-kid friends telling me how good it is.
You're missing it. Yeah, and you're like knee deep in Legos and poop, you know?
Yeah.
Still thinking
So this is Swell Season's art and design edition.
Yeah.
And we do want to talk about your art practice.
Right.
Yes.
And where that began, because you're a writer, you're working with these great organizations. When did you start making paintings and prints and photographs? How did that kick off for you?
I always messed around. I was always a watercolor painter. I love.
Really?
Yeah, I love watercolor. John Marin.
I don't think I've ever seen any of your watercolor paintings.
They're private.
Yeah.
I keep them I keep them tight. It's more a meditation than an actual art practice. I definitely gained inspiration from a couple famous fellas that throughout my life that have just blown my mind, and the art always have done that, more personal rather than professional. John Marin is an East Coast guy. John Singer Sargent,
Sure.
Winslow Homer, just very, a lot of water, with Winslow. A lot of cityscapes and urban stuff with John Marin, and John Singer Sargent was just a master at
to study Sargent and his application of paint and to replicate water is just unbelievable. The colors that you find in Sargent's work, you would never think to put in any type of painting of water, but like if you study it, you know what I'm talking about, man.
It's mind blowing. Even his drawings, are just everything about him is just very yes. So I always dabbled. It was always, again, like I said, it was more meditation than a practice. It was something I've always journaled. Writing, would always went hand in hand, and especially while living in a car and working in a place where editing and spell checking and fact checking were the everyday, the ability to kind of tune it out and leave it behind, and just kind of free write and free paint, and just the beauty of watercolor, in my opinion, is that it's an easy medium, and
it can travel with you.
It can travel with you, yeah.
Right.
And it was always part of my journaling that I really enjoy doing. But again, there was, I was always floating around it. I never really had a light bulb moment in my artistic life until about 15 years ago.
So for the most part, you're self-taught artist, but yeah. Your academic background is in literature.
Yes, totally. Yes. I was an art minor, but sometimes that doesn't count for much. The bulk of my instruction has been just self. self-taught
Literature is a
and
great
studied.
place to start for that kind of thing. Can you guys hear me right now? I put on new headphones.
Yeah, I
I'm
got
sorry.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
But I think writing is this, an abstraction when it comes to painting. The same thing, photography. Like, if you can figure out how to develop a story, an idea, a narrative that way, and engage people. I think that's very hard through words. With so to translate that into a visual practice, maybe out of I don't know, just necessity, or sometimes I was I'm a visual artist. Sometimes damn it, I just want to say this in words.
Well, I think that Chris, that's kind of the reason why we do this podcast, and we've invited Scott along for the
Yeah.
ride is that the aesthetic epicenter is the ocean. It's the inspiration that we all kind of find, this very primal thing, this thing that we gravitate to. We all do. And then we find the inspiration and we take the aesthetics of that medium and move outward, whether it's literature or culinary or sculpture or printmaking or music or, it's all transferable, So, yeah, it's interesting, Scott, to look at. I was looking at your website. I've followed you on Instagram, and I think Chris and I are really interested to find out more about your practice of printmaking and the cultural context of that, where it emanates from. Hopefully, you can talk about that, and then. Then there's the relation to surfing and historical documentation. There's so much to dive into. So, could you tell us more about your style of printmaking and where that comes from, what your influences are?
Sure, easy. Like I said, always working. I never really, it was always a personal kind of thing, and there was never really any kind of commercial aspect of what I did. Not that you produce art for commercial consumption, but it was always kind of a private thing. And a while ago, while waiting online at the veterinarian's office for prescription medication for my high maintenance dog, I saw it's a great, beautiful vet's office, and they had a mini art show of a fella from New England, the New England area. Kenneth Peacock was his name, and he had black and white prints of all different kinds of fish on the wall. And like I started referencing before, right at that moment, this kind of light bulb went off in my head. My grandfather and father, they were both fishermen. I never really took to it as much as they did, surf fishermen. I just never really, it was never really my scene. But they were both surfers too, but they were more on the fisherman side than surfing side. I guess like most of us, I am a hoarder of surfboards. And they were always kind of, personal craft, even if they didn't work, I still kept them around, and they, clogged up my garage and my basement and my everything.
I can attest to that. I was in his basement at his restaurant.
There's a couple. That's like the tip of the iceberg too. Anyway,
I think we're all guilty of hanging on to a couple of boards that we know we should let go, but we just can't do it.
All of us
just can't do it. Yeah,
so
I know.
What part of the light bulb reaction was looking at what this fellow was doing with fish, striped bass and fluke, and what I have in my basement, and connecting those two dots and noticing the parallels between the two practices. And I dove in. It's the practice is called gyotaku. It's Japanese. Goi means fish, taku means rubbing, and that was all explained to me in a little, little 5x9 card next to Kenneth's work.
Right.
It said that traditionally Japanese fishermen used a koji paper, which is a Japanese paper, and a
The rice
sumi ink,
paper.
which is
Right.
a charcoal based ink. So I went home and started digging, and I took I have a nice Ricky Carroll locomotion Ricky Carroll shaped fish Twinser, and I found large koji paper, and I made my own sumi ink, and I kind of just dove in, and voila. It was kind of like
Yeah.
this, it wasn't very long after seeing those pictures on the wall, to me getting my materials together, and actually, maybe a week, maybe less, to producing something. It was kind of like one of those, I had to do it.
Yeah.
I the first koji paper I found was pretty expensive, so I wound up doing a first couple prints on a just a butcher paper. Not, I'm back in New Jersey. My wife and I are living together, not married yet. And we have a restaurant downstairs, and we use, large rolls of butcher paper for our tables. We
Right.
gave our customers crayons, and let them kind of do what they wanted to on the paper on the table, and it served the dual purpose of kind of protecting the linen, so it lasted a little
So,
longer.
Scott,
Was that the Labrador Lounge?
That was the Labrador Lounge. Yes.
Nice, cool.
Yeah.
Scott, can we back it up just a sec for our listeners? I mean, like, between the three of us, we all understand your process. We understand what your work is. We understand its influences. But for the listeners who don't understand, like, this Japanese form of inking the fish and printing them, and how that relates to you inking surfboards, like, could you just be a bit more,
Yes. Totally. Super easy. So yes, the way of recording their catch was to actually pull the fish out of the water. Japanese fishermen, this is painting and ink on the fish, laying the paper over the fish, pressing it down, and pulling it off. So you basically have just a relief print of the fish, an actual,
it's like a contact print.
100%.
Yeah.
Not a very difficult process. Aesthetically pleasing to some people, sometimes a little strange. For me, the light bulb was the so in all of us, our collections in surfboards tend to kind of rotate around what we're into, and for me, it was always I was more a fan of the mid 70s, early 80s kind of surfboards. And the connection for me was the actual vernacular of a surfboard that has a swallowtail being referred to as a fish.
As a fish.
And the actual swimming, breathing, living fish. And that when I say light bulb moment, that's the connection I'm talking about.
Well, it's a simple correlation. I mean, and when it goes off in your head, it's so simple, but like it gives birth to like this like amazing connection between cultures and sport and surfing culture and the history of surfing and the history of surfing culture. I mean, when I started like locking into your work, I was thinking like, wow, this is like on the surface so simple, but it has a lot of layers. It's got a lot of cultural layers.
Yeah, totally. Yes, the practice itself is simple. And, over the years, there's, techniques that I've learned that aren't very difficult for, as compared to watercolor by John Singer Sargent or watercolor by me. They're the process of surfboard rubbings is not very technical. It's I don't want to say easy because it's not easy. But it is kind of easy.
I don't see it being easy, but whenever I see what you do, Scott, I'm always like, how did he not just smudge the fuck out of this? Like, why is there not just like a rail spinning off the side? Like, how do you get,
Sure. Yeah. That's the technical aspect. But I have friends that work for free. And there's a very, very easy way of laying the paper down. The Koji paper is rice based, so it's really durable and expensive. So, always in the beginning there was a preciousness to the actual paper itself, which is very Japanese aesthetically. But I always took great care, and like I started to say, there was a cannon fodder. Definitely there was butcher paper. That was, my first couple experiments were definitely butcher paper, a lot cheaper and more disposable.
Make your mistakes there. Those are your proofs.
It's your artist proof for sure. I want one of those.
The funny thing about the whole practice, and not skipping ahead too far, though, was that the first prints are usually the best, usually my favorite. The way that the ink is laid, it's not so heavy, it's a bit lighter, it's a bit fresher and new. And I don't do any more than 6 prints of one surfboard. It's a self-imposed rule that I placed upon myself. I don't know, just to keep it fresh and new and interesting, and kept me kind of grounded in the fact that if something worked really well, I can't just pump it out.
Well, it's Scott, it's not an unlimited series. It's a limited edition, and it's a process that is unique every time you lift the paper off the board. So you can't replicate that. You can't do, and to make them special and to keep them special. And I thought a lot about this. I thought a lot about how the Japanese fishermen are actually honoring the fish before they actually eat it. It's the respect of the fish, it's the record of the fish, and it's a connection with the fish. And the same way you're like applying that respect to the board. Like that board may not even be seaworthy anymore, but what you're doing is like you're documenting it in a moment in history, and you're acknowledging it. It's almost like a spiritual process that you don't want to replicate over and over and over, because it would cheapen it.
Completely agree.
I really was touched very much, and I started thinking about this like 11-foot, like 1958 Dewey Weber that I've got, and it's got its scars and it's banged up, and in my mind, I always thought that I would make it seaworthy, and I never did. But like, it's got such a history, and I think that history in any board that you find and that you ink is being like, it's being saved and it's being noted, and it's like a real connection with the object through your process.
Completely agree.
Yeah. And I was kind of interested, in the cultural dynamic of Japanese printmaking, and then the historical dynamic of surf culture. And then I was thinking, like, how do you select a board? How do you make that connection with a board that you feel is worthy to be inked?
Now I'm a lot more selective than I was in the beginning. One, I believe it has to have a unique characterization, a unique character to it. Whether it's size, history, scars, modifications, I'm a bit, like I said, I'm a bit more selective now than I was, say, about 10 years ago, where I was just kind of, if it was a fish, it was worthy of being printed. I still believe that, but there's not enough time in the world to print all that. So now I'm looking for oddities. Sometimes they're a bit esoteric in my own head. Sometimes they're obvious. Probably maybe about 10 years ago, maybe a little, oh God, probably longer now. I was able to go out to Australia, and we have a bar and we have a restaurant in Asbury, me and my wife, and I reached out to a filmmaker, Andrew Kidman is his name, just online, and was like, listen, you're doing this tour for this movie. If you're going from Philadelphia to New York, I know you're Australian. Why don't you stop in Asbury Park and, we can put you up for the night, and give you dinner, and, why don't you show your movie here? And he wound up coming to Asbury, and we hit it off pretty well. And, after, he was there for like 2 days. After the 2 days, he was like, all right, if you're ever in Australia, look me up. And you know how everyone says that after you meet someone and have a good time. And the wheels, again, just started turning and turning. And he was working on a book of his, Ether, I think the name was the book, name of the book. So
Yep.
he had a collection of all of Mick Mackey, a friend of his. Mick Mackey's a surfboard shaper. He had a bunch of his original flex tail boards in his home in Australia, and with a bunch of other boards. He had Pat Curran's pickle board. He had a couple of Dave Parmenter original Widowmakers there. So I kind of was like, oh man, are you serious? Because I think I might really come out to Australia. So, it was there that I was able to kind of take a better look at the actual board itself,
Right.
and learn to be a little more discerning in what I find interesting, and maybe what other people would find interesting, or if what I find interesting, I could educate people on why it's interesting.
So I completely understand what you're saying. Like, you just you have an affinity with a particular board. You're like, I like the way this is. I like the design of this. I like its history through its scars and its markings and its shape and its size. And it's like, but are you looking to document history, or are you looking to just like recognize the aesthetics of something that's really speaking to you?
15 plus years into it, yes, I want to document history. I want to preserve these boards.
Yes, I agree.
By these men who, talk about being around for the birth of things,
Right.
There, there's the Hobie Alters and the Bing Copelands and the, and the Hap Jacobs and the guys that really birthed the foam and fiberglass surfboards are dying. And, and when they're gone 100 years from now, we're going to look back at them and say, shit, we should have saved everything from them. And
hey, I'm gonna throw it out there right now. This spring, I want to bring you an 11-foot Dewey Weber that was shaped by Dewey Weber, and
awesome.
we gotta ink this bad boy.
Sure, that'd be
I'm
great.
serious. It'll be awesome.
That would be wonderful. I have enough paper. You will actually ink it. I'll just help you. Super.
It's kind of funny though that like the couple of guys you just mentioned, Parmenter and Mackey, they've all come through Asbury and shaped boards actually.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is kind of cool. Like
Yeah.
Phil Brown, who's been on Tyler's, other podcasts associated with this one, they had a conversation. It's amazing how those guys have innovated and done beautiful things past Steve Liss, like the next generation of like, I would say like Mackey's after Steve, like generationally maybe.
Yeah, he is. Well,
Like,
I guess Mick's older.
is he?
Yeah, he's old.
He's like a koala bear to me. I don't know, like,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
like, I feel like Steve is the one who like crushed that, and then like other people have been improvising on it, and like the people who come through have been kind of cool. Um, but I've seen the Mackie print you made. I think Phil has one, no?
Yeah, he does.
And it's in his living room, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And
Mick's,
it's kind of
yeah.
cool to like. So I must ask the question: are you making? There's the historical side of it, and there's also like contemporaries who are making what I think are really important, progressive, but functional boards. Do you make that distinction when you decide now to do that? Do you say like, well, Mick's making some crazy shit, and it's worth doing?
It's innovation. You know, it's
Yeah,
Yeah.
innovation breeds normality, and it breeds kind of like you go. There's transition eras, and
yeah,
there's talked a lot about in the surf world about the movement from longboards to shortboards, and the movement from I have a Channel Islands, a Twinser it's called, and it was like a late 90s, early 2000s. It's kind of when the fish shape started coming back into
Right.
vogue.
Right.
Al Merrick did this. It's a twin fin, like
Swallowtail, right?
low swallowtail,
Yep.
and it came with a super small trailer fin in the middle, and it's to anyone else it's just this kind of board, but it was the mainstream's interpretation of what Steve List did, and how you could kind of move a Channel Island surfer away from the Black Beauty, the Tom Curran Black Beauty, into a Steve List world, and eventually how shapers like Al took those people and sold them full out twin fin fishes not long after that Twinser was around, and um, innovation is great. Transition era to me is super important. That's historically
hmm
important, especially following the trends. And again, you know, the more accessible surfing is to everyone, going back to the whole internet thing and the surf report thing we are talking about before, the more culturally relevant it is, and the more it's going to be pushed to be in the Olympics, and the more it's going to be pushed to be recorded and preserved, as when we look back, and there are no more Bing Copelands, and there are no more Hap Jacobs, and there are no
Right.
more Hobie Alters. We're going to talk about those guys on reverence levels of 10 times 10 times 10, the more generationally far away we are from them. So
So you've got
So
like
you're
one eye on the past, and you've got one eye on the future, trying to forecast like what's important now, or what's going to be important.
for me, I don't really look. I don't try and I try not to forecast what I think will be important, because ultimately what I think means nothing. um, I like to look at trends already established, and then try and reverse engineer it back
Right.
to its roots, and trace it. For example, I this past summer I got this great Carl Ekstrom asymmetrical longboard, and
mhm.
you look at great innovative shapers like a Donald Brink, and you look at Carl's board, and immediately I want to take that and throw a Meyerhofer right in the middle of it, and kind of like see how they all influenced each other, and see where it started from, and see where it's ending, not only in a surfboard itself, which interests me but aesthetically in artwork that can interest more than me.
Right.
You know, interest a
So
larger group of people that might have the ability to buy more or be more interested in it, or might work at a museum and
Mm-hmm.
connect the cultural relevance of surfing, and
right.
I don't know,
Well,
work.
So
listen,
you wouldn't.
it surely does bridge the gap for sure.
I
Yeah.
completely agree. Totally. It's a
Would.
nice user friendly way to introduce people to it, and also to historically document it. This is
Hmm.
exactly everything about this surfboard. This is where the wings started. This is where the fin box started and where it ended. This is exactly how wide it is, exactly how big it
Yeah.
is, exactly
I
everything.
And we will be right back. And now, back to our show.
I was saying to Chris earlier today when we were preparing to talk to you, I was talking about like how uh, when the fish is inked, you're really kind of like inking its spirit in a way, and preserving it. And when you ink the board, it's like almost like you're inking its soul in a way, and it is kind of transcendent. They are ghost like, and
100%.
uh, I thought like one of the things Chris and I were talking about is like, like I've got a board that was like shaped in 1958. I mean, I was born in 69. So this board has passed through many owners,
Right.
right? You ever think about that? And
100%.
then it lands in your hands, and then you're there to document it in a very, very concrete way, but it's still ephemeral.
And
It's
even to go a level above that, I mean, where was your board shaped? Where that one
which
and
one?
was it a California board?
As a California board, yeah.
Right. And so like, where did those guys take their cues from?
I
And
know.
take that back a step further, and in the end, it all goes back to actual fish, which is fucking nuts. Goes back to an animal that can move through water, very hydrodynamically correct, and it goes back to people interpreting that animal into an inanimate object and making changes based upon moving through water quicker. And it's
Mm.
the thing that's been blowing me away, and I started going into it with Chris the other day, is my sister lives in Texas. So a couple of years ago, I went to her in-laws have a house on South Padre Island, and kind of like the New York, New Jersey thing. Like I was like, fucking, we're going to South Padre Island, thinking that I'm going to the Cancun of Texas. And I guess for certain periods of time it is. But then for other periods of time, it's a really cool coastal town. It's a
Yeah.
sleepy coastal town that has a pretty decent surf culture. So again, light bulb moments. The wheels started turning, and I was like, holy shit, how did a board born in Hawaii, shaped in California, migrate its way to Texas, and then
It's incredible.
once it landed in Texas, how did the people that were on trend, wanting to make a buck, shaping surfboards and selling them to people in Texas, how did they translate that common language? I'll use that term, which is one that's
Mhm.
how do they translate it and make it work for them in their area? And then how did it move from there to the East Coast, or how did we skip, how did California skip Texas and move to the East Coast first? And then, so you have these like migrations of trends and things. And, luckily, it's a medium in which I'm interested in general. I was into it before I started inking surfboards. So I found something that was I was passionate about. And I know it's
Yeah.
so cliche to say, but I was kind of doing what I'm doing now before I was doing what I'm doing now. I was kind of doing it by nature, in my collecting and, in my hoarding, I guess you could call it, of surfboards. And now, I'm kind of, I look at them a little bit different, but not much, because I don't know. I think as surfers, you could tell when something's going to work for you or not. You could be impressed by the shiny thing or the new thing, but in the end, you kind of know. You kind of know where you're
Yeah.
at in life,
Right.
where you're at in your ability, and what's going to work for you. And I've kind of been doing that. And most of the, okay, there's a couple knee boards I have that I definitely cannot knee board. But overall, it's, the collection of it is things that I'm into, and things that are already resonating with me before artwork.
And we will be right back. And now, back to our show.
So you have this Texas project coming up. Who were the shapers coming out of there that you found?
It's not even a project. It's one of those things that every time I'm thinking about going to see my sister, I start like, okay, all right, I'm going on Craigslist and I'm putting the most like weirdo spots in Texas in the world, and I'm putting the word surfboard in search. West Texas, Marfa. And I'm kind of starting these like searches for, so I'll start here. This is an easy place to start. Petrillo surfboards, Frank Petrillo. He was a California guy, late 60s. He was on the whole like longboard trip. He had a place called the Frog House in Huntington, I think it was. And pumping out longboards, pumping them out, pumping out. Wound up having a disagreement with his partner, some license. It was the Wild West, I guess, at that point. And surfing was so hot that if you knew how to shape and glass a board, you were shaping and glassing it. Money was flying all over, and it was, the hippie in the 70s in California. So he wound up having a disagreement with his partner in California, disillusioned with everything, left and just started shaping surfboards out of Texas. Moved to Texas and started shaping surfboards. So anything Petrillo anything with more than one fin that has the word Petrillo on it was shaped in Texas, or areas elsewhere other than California. He never licensed his name to my knowledge. So yeah, something like that. So, you get a California guy that moves to Texas and starts making boards. And Petrillo's one, Frye, Frye, is another shaper out of Galveston. Yeah, I just, there's another guy in the 80s I want to get my hands on, Hosanna surfboards, thruster, glassed in fin, thruster age. So it's not really a project. I guess it's a project. I could call it a project. It's one of those things that I'd love to be able to take my idea of tracing history, surfboard shaping, and I'd love to apply it to certain areas of the world. And I'd love to dig into it, but the sheer volume of California or Hawaii or Australia, they scare me. The massiveness of it, and the prevailing culture is just so huge and deep and wide. I think southeastern Texas is wrangleable. It's small enough that I can use it as like a microcosm to the macrocosm, which, you line up Texas from, the endless summer going there in 1966, and Bruce Brown showing the world oil tanker surfing, and you take that and you move it towards a modern day Texas born and raised shaper, and you could that seems easier than going and trying to, you know, track down any kind of Bob Simmons in La Jolla
Mhm.
and letting someone, you know, ink
Yeah.
it.
It's
So
arguably more interesting too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
yeah, yes and no. You know, it's
Eh,
different. It's something that deserves a little bit um, of its due. You know,
mhm.
it's a living, breathing culture. Um, you know, people are into it, and they're second, third generation surfers out of Texas. You know, which is
right.
super
Mhm.
interesting.
So would you say that you find the boards or the boards find you?
Right now, I am finding the boards.
Hmm.
Mhm.
You know, I'd like to get a little bit of, you know, again, having kids and a family and a job, kind of, I have to go look for money, right? And the money I'm looking for is not really money for me. It's money to give me the time to kind of go to look for these things to
Hmm.
justify being gone for a couple weeks, a
Sure.
year,
Mhm.
you know,
Sure.
in you know, southeastern Texas, um, documenting this stuff, and you know, maybe selling some along the way to try and help finance it, but
Totally.
never
It's
really
a it's a it's a
So
you want to be, it's a labor of love, and you're breaking even, and you're pursuing your passion, and you're making beautiful artwork, right?
trying.
Um, yeah.
I must ask, like, I love these prints. I've seen them for a long
Mm.
time now. I have some boards I want to give to you. So does Chris. Um, but where do these things, for the most part, land? Are they in hotels? Is it private clients? How are these things like? Who's picking these things up?
You know, that's an excellent question. I've been kind of all over the place. Luckily, yes, hotels, yes, private clients, yes, restaurants. Um, yeah, knock on some wood here. It's been
Yeah.
yeah. I think I think I think I'm a surfer's wife's best option to having a surfboard in the house without actually having to have a surfboard in the house. I'm a surfer's wife's friend.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
they can call me and I can give them a mid '80s Southern California twin fin, uh, awesome, you know, schroff that they can hang in their house, and it can be as pleasing as anyone wants it to be based on where it is, how it's framed, and what someone wants to talk about. You know, if the
Yeah.
surfer in the family wants to talk about Peter Schroff, awesome. If the a non-surfer in the house wants to talk about the designer and the art form itself, awesome. You kind of I kind of hit on both cylinders there, which is
Yeah.
kind of cool. I think Peter Schroff is way more interesting, but but you know, that's just
Mhm.
me.
But what's really interesting is a lot of the artists we work with on this podcast, they have very traditional avenues that they've taken, like galleries, straight to like direct collectors, and their work's inspired by surfing. It might not be specifically understandable in that way, but it seems like you make art for actual surfers who are interested in what you're doing, and it
Yeah,
lands in their laps in a in
yeah.
a in a kind of cool way.
Listen, I would be lying if I said I wouldn't mind going the that route. And you know, and again, the more you know, the more I'm able to spend time in the studio, the more I'm
Mhm.
able to work on the things that you know. The freedom of being able to sell a surfboard print allows the other things it floating in my head that are similar to what I do, but sometimes way out there. Yeah, they allow it to become a reality and they afford it to become a reality,
Yeah.
or at least
Sure.
afford me the time to explore it, whether it works or not.
Yeah. So, since you're obsessed with three-dimensional objects and documenting them and making them these beautiful things, have you ever made three-dimensional objects yourself?
Yes, totally. I dream of sculpture,
Mm.
100%. You talk about surfboards or
Well,
Not even surfboards, just
I
art.
I dream of sculpture. I dream of it all the time. I My problem with producing it, and it's not really a problem because I have no problem producing it. My problem is what do you do with it if no one buys it?
you put it in a box and it lives in your studio or in your
Right.
basement.
Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, um, some of my dreams are large, and I feel a need to produce them, and then I'm kind of saddled with the I I I I think of Richard Serra, and how does one of his stature, where are his failures? Now people I'm sure have bought them, but where did they live before he was able to afford a warehouse to store them? How does so yes, I dream of sculpture. I I try and get it in wherever I can. I'm working on something right now that can easily be adapted into like kind of a chicky pop kind of world. And I don't want it to go there. I want to keep it in a bit more of the sculpture world rather than something I could
Mhm.
reproduce and sell at every surf shop from here to Australia. Um, but yeah, I three-dimensional is extremely attractive to me. I love sculpture. I dream about it. I am not a very practiced person in it because of space.
Yeah.
It kind
Yeah.
of sucks. I
You
don't.
know, it's funny because like, no matter like my wife is a painter and until we were able to, just get her the studio that she needed, she was working small. I mean, because where are we going to put it? How are we going to store it? And like our house just kept filling up with paintings, and then finally we got her the studio that she deserved, and like she's just like maxing out the size of the canvases, and she's able to store them and make them, and it's rational, it's logistical.
Well, and
Mhm.
also too, I mean, you know, eh, gifting a friend most people have a wall to hang a painting on or a print on. Living with sculpture is a very interesting thing. I don't
Mhm.
know. One, most people I don't know have the ability to house it, especially if it's a little bit bigger. And two, people are very strange about that. I'm even strange about it. I, selfishly try and create things that I envision a space for in my own house because eventually, if I'm gonna, eventually most of the sculpture I produce, I'm gonna have to put in my house somewhere and then put it in a box, because
Mhm.
it's one of those things that I think three dimension is important.
Yeah.
I try and work some kind of three dimension into every space that I'm allowed to be in two dimensions. I really push for some aspect of sculpture to it. Only because I think the more people see it, eventually, hopefully, the more people will be attracted to it and buy it, and then allowing me to create more. Basically, I just
Yeah,
want to move some so I can make some new stuff.
well, it's interesting when you start talking about space and sculpture. When I talk to my students, I'm an art teacher as well as an artist. I talk with them about like when you consider sculpture, you're not just looking at the object; you're looking at the space that it occupies. There's this, the negative space. Like you just can't say, oh, here's the object. No, you have to consider the space that it occupies and how you navigate it. And people don't think about that.
Yeah.
So when considering sculpture, you got to think about the space as well. So yeah, it's troublesome for sure. You got to have the space.
But it's great. I totally dig it. I love all of it, actually. So outside's a good
we
space.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, outside's a great space.
Outside's a great space.
So when it comes to your printmaking outside of the traditional method, are there any contemporary artists that you look at, you're like, wow, like this is inspiring for me right now?
Right.
I mean, I'm constantly inspired. Constantly. Most recently, I saw a piece on a painter, Derek Fajor. I'm butchering his last name. He rips paper and makes these multi-layered canvases, and he's just it's great. Printmaking, yeah, definitely. Again, the age in which we live in is so funny because you can be following someone on Instagram and immediately like every single thing they produce, but not even know their name. And I know this Japanese woman does these excellent black and white prints of, they look like the inside of rocks, and they're gorgeous and super inspiring. But I could give you her Instagram handle, but that's about it. It's kind of like one of those I'm blown away at the amount of inspiring stuff I see every day. Actually, not blown away is the wrong term. It's almost like it's too much sometimes.
It is. It's overwhelming. We're saturated with content and imagery that, like, I know for me, sometimes I just gotta like close the door, and just like stay inside my own head, and just, it's hard because there are so many amazing things to look at and be influenced by, and it gets a little overwhelming. There's a lot out there.
There's a lot, and it's I mean it's just, and it's good. There's a lot of good shit out there.
Yeah.
So there also is, you also see some stuff that you're like, oh man, like, wow. The art world is a funny world, and these days it's even funnier, adding in the whole digital world, and
for sure,
and not even wanting to go there because it's head spinning, but it is a whole NFT world, and it's funny. It's great. Sometimes it's too much. I always like to take it back to Sumi ink and Koji paper, and it helps ground me. It helps make it very easy and catchable and simple to me.
I love that aspect of it. I have a quick question, very simple one. Wax on or wax off?
I print the bottom of the board, so wax off. I print the control part of the board, never the top. Always the bottom.
All right.
Yeah, so wax off. Always wax off.
So Chris, do you think we're ready to do on the clock? I think we're ready.
I think we are. I think this is pretty good.
All right, Scott.
Want to take the reins here?
All right. So Scott, here's the deal. Every time we have a guest on, we do a rapid fire series of questions, and without thinking, you just got to say the first thing that comes to mind.
Gotcha.
No elaboration. Just give me the answer, and we move on.
Done.
Are you ready?
Blue.
All right, here we go.
32.
What? Blue. No, red. No, yellow. What are you currently riding?
Oh, currently a 7.4 thruster fish, Chris Szegeski shape.
Nice.
All right.
Yes.
What are you currently listening to?
I am listening to. It's Mardi Gras time, so my uncle made me a CD of a band called Royal Finger Bowl. They are a New Orleans band, and I cannot stop listening to their album "Happy Birthday Zabo." Zabo.
I love great recommendations, man.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
great.
back. I'm going there.
Royal Finger Bowl.
All
It's
right.
very Mardi Gras theme, so you got a couple days until it's all over.
What are you currently reading?
I just finished Paul Theroux's Hotel Honolulu, and I only did that because I want to read Below the Waves of Waimea. And I am familiar with a couple of his other books, like, of course, Mosquito Coast, and what's the other one I read? Trying to think of it. I'll think of it later. So yes, Hotel Honolulu is my last.
Awesome. Another good recommendation.
He's a surfer, and he's a pretty cool guy.
All right. What is the most memorable board that you owned?
I own a 6'8" Channon. That's my father's single fin.
That's awesome. Do you ride it?
I have ridden it. It has like down rail, and it was like a down rail. It's a 70s invention, and it something about down rail and me does not work. Doesn't work at all.
Okay.
Maybe in bigger waves, but that's not the board I'm taking out in bigger waves. But he passed away when I was 13, and that's the only thing I have of his. So it is very special to me.
Definitely.
It lived on top. It lived on top of one of our restaurants, and for the other people living with me, the vernacular was, if I'm not here, this board gets out first.
Yeah.
The building is on fire. Grab that board and leave.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
No doubt.
There you go.
All right, here we go. If you could ink a fish right now, what fish would it be and why?
I always liked the flounder. I think flounder are super neat fish, very primitive and tasty.
Yeah.
I think it would be a flounder.
Okay.
I'll bring you a flounder, Scott. I promise.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. When was the last time that you dropped in on someone? Was it on purpose or was it by accident?
It was on purpose. It was a couple weeks ago in the Dominican Republic. It was. I am a very conscientious surfer, and I know I'm very aware of when people will make it or not. And so when I do choose to purposely drop in, I know that I'm dropping in, and I know that they're not going to make it.
They're way too. They're behind the peak. They're going to blow the takeoff. You're going.
It's a calculated choice.
You can identify a bad decision.
All right. Well, this is the follow-up question, which we kind of just answered, but the question is, did you feel badly about it?
Nah.
No. Okay.
I could give you my most memorable drop-in. I dropped in on Joel Tudor at Big Rock in La Jolla. And
good for you.
I've surfed Big Rock.
Yeah. Big Rock, I'm a goofy foot, so Big Rock is freaking awesome.
Perfect.
Perfect. The wave was perfect. I was in a better spot. He would have made it, but I was in a better spot. And I dropped in, and he told me to fuck off. And I took it. But the wave was very memorable, and it was.
Did you ever speak to him again?
I did not. No, that was.
Well, then who cares, man?
I saw him a couple times at the magazine, but never in a social setting. But it was.
Oh, that's so funny.
It was.
He would have done worse to you.
Yeah, this was pre pre jujitsu, Joel.
Oh man.
This was
Okay.
this was a long pre 96, right?
Well, you got him at a
Oh,
good
wow.
time then. You dropped in on him at a good time, or else he would have whooped your ass. Maybe, who
He
knows?
probably would have. Yeah. I was in a better spot, and he knew it. He was catching everything. Like, he was catching everything.
I hope he hears this and smiles about that.
I hope so. Probably will
He's
not.
like that.
I remember it though.
He's gonna be like that guy in 1986 at Big Rock. 1996. I remember that guy.
Scott. Fuck him.
All right, last question.
I'm ready.
What was your most recent memorable wave ridden?
Ooh, good question. It was a left, same session, Dominican Republic, a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
Yeah, nothing special. Waist high. I have a 7/8 Hap Jacobs that I brought down there, and it's just a really good board, and it works very well for me backside. Yeah, nothing very memorable about the wave. It just everything clicked backside. It's definitely the board. It wasn't me.
Can you say what wave it was?
I can't say what wave it was. No.
Nah.
It was not the one I dropped in on the person, but it was at that same session. That was my most recent.
Sworn to secrecy, as it should be.
All right. Well, Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and finding out a little bit more about your practice.
Yeah. I hope I narrowed it down enough for you. I know sometimes my brain kind of is all over the place, but
I think we could have talked a lot longer just about boards and your kind of understanding of the history of surfboard shaping throughout the U.S. and abroad. But, that might be a later thing with Tyler.
That's a deeper dive for sure.
Yeah. I'm totally into it because I think it's important. I think, like I said, as these guys die and as listen, we're all surfers here. There's a reason why you will not sell a couple of your boards. There's, we go through, there's a couple magic boards you hold, right? And imagine your Hobie altar and imagine your personal quiver, and what makes those boards so special is got to be special to the world. So yeah, we could go forever in on that, but yeah, that's what gets me, especially guys that he's laid his hands on 25,000 surfboards and could have had all of them. Why did he keep those 8 or whatever, however many he has in his garage? Why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's an amazing talk. I think this should be a to be continued, I think.
Let's do it. I like it.
Yeah.
Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you so much for your time, Scott.
Yeah.
Very nice to meet you, Chris.
It was a pleasure, Scott. It was a pleasure.